Hallo und herzlich willkommen, liebe Football-Community und alle, die wir noch bekehren müssen. Opu Folge 2. Den Auftakt hat vergangene Woche mein lieber Freund und Kollege Kasim Edebali gemacht. Das könnt ihr euch natürlich alles noch auf YouTube im Football TV-Channel im Real Life anschauen. Aber heute wird Englisch gesprochen, denn mein Gast heute, der würde denken, ich habe nicht alle Latten am Zaun, wenn ich jetzt auf Deutsch weiterrede. Der versteht nämlich kein Deutsch. Das werden wir alles rausfinden. So I'm gonna switch over to English. My guest today. He has hit the European American football scene like a hammer, you could say. First of all, in the German Football League as an offensive coordinator for the Potsdam Royals, who he led to the playoffs. And then in the last 2 years, he was a coach in the European League of Football. First of all, head coach of the year 2022 for his amazing run that he had with the Barcelona Dragons. And then most of the people already know who I'm talking about because my guest today is the assistant coach of the year 2023, the offense coordinator of Rhein, the champion, Mr. Andrew Weidinger. Hi, Andrew.
Hello, how you doing? Thank you very much for having me.
It's wonderful. I'm honored that you find the time, and naturally, you're in Arizona still, so you're not in the German cold. Um, if we would be in one room now, I would offer you, like a coffee or tea, but I guess you already know where I'm heading to. I heard this rumor about you. I heard that Andrew Weidinger is not drinking anything hot. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but like hot coffee is just kind of gross to me. Regular coffee is kind of gross, but you throw some ice in there, I'll drink that. I need my caffeine fix. So yeah, I'm not drinking anything hot. It's just the hot cocoa, none of it. It just doesn't work.
Well, there are college quarterbacks that make a fortune out of drinking their coffee with mayonnaise now, so
I'm
you
good.
never
That's
know.
where I draw the line. I'm not putting mayo in my coffee. I'm not even going to try it.
Well, to tell a story, it's always good to start in the beginning, right? So I checked up Wikipedia, and if they're correct, then Andrew Weidinger was born in 1982 in Phoenix, Arizona. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So how was life in the Weidinger household?
Shoot, I got my parents, Joe and Debbie, just we're regular American family. I got a younger brother named Kevin. Grew up in Phoenix, spent my whole life here in Arizona until I got to the became a professional and moved across the country to Georgia and lived in Georgia and Florida a little bit. And then as things were collapsing around us when I was coaching with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I got a house back here in Phoenix, very close to where I grew up at, and I've been back here ever since. And then obviously now splitting time between Europe and Arizona.
How is that splitting up? When will we greet you in Germany again? When will you be back?
So I got two young kids. I got an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and with their school schedules, the moment that they get out of school, they'll come out, and the moment they need to go back to school, they'll come back. And so I'm going to wait until the last possible moment to leave to go to Germany. So just to help out around here, because there's a couple weeks on the front end and the back end where they can't be there with me out in Germany, and so it's obviously puts a lot of stress on everybody back home, starting with my wife to manage two kids with no help. So as
Yeah,
late
well,
as
she has
humanly
to
possible.
manage two kids and a husband. I mean,
It's it's sad but true. Very
so
true.
going back to when Andrew Weidinger was younger. First of all, Weidinger, this sounds German. Do you have like German Austrian relatives or anything?
Yeah, it's funny. I never even really thought about my heritage or where I'm from and that sort of stuff growing up. And when I was in college, I had a Russian history class and it was taught, and I probably a German professor, and it was maybe the most boring thing I've ever been to. And so I had to drop it. I had to get out of there because I couldn't stand it. And I went in to tell him I was going to drop it, and he said, "Oh, Mr. Weidinger." And that's when it dawned on me, like, wait a second, I'm not from here. My family's from somewhere else. So we'd have to trace it back to know for sure, but that was a moment for me when I realized, hey, I'm not just truly purely American. I wasn't born, my ancestors weren't born in America.
Well, there is this really famous Swiss name actually that has been in the NFL, Röttlisberger. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger, this is like the most Swiss name you can have.
Yeah,
Um, but I want to get you attended, I think, what did I write down? Thunderbird High School in Arizona. Did you play ball yourself and what
I
position?
I did. I was a safety, played a little quarterback starting out and a little receiver. I got hurt when I was in high school. I cracked one of my vertebrae, my L5 down there, and it wasn't a situation where it was like an added chance of paralysis or anything like that. I came back and played a couple of games after that had happened, but not many. And but that was what really got me into coaching because I loved the sport and I was devastated that I couldn't play anymore. And so I started, pestering the guys that my coaches in high school, can I help out? Can I help out? And they obliged. And those are guys that I keep in touch with to this day. I was actually texting with them just last week. Great people who
Also, you
taught.
actually got connected to coaching in high school already. I thought you started to get into coaching when you were at Arizona State.
No, so the coaching bug. It's funny when I was real little, I played. You grow up, you playing flag football, and we had a team with a coach who he didn't know what he's doing. He was just out there because his kid was on the team and they needed somebody, right? And so I don't know, maybe like 8, 9, 10 years old. I'm out there calling the plays and all that stuff, and maybe that's where it all started. But definitely high school, getting hurt, not being able to play, and really feeling like I needed to still be around the sport. That was when it kind of all started for me.
And I don't know if you can put that in some simple words because it's such a huge field, but what is it that fascinates you in coaching?
The things that I really like the strategy behind football. I like the competitiveness behind football. When I started out in the NFL, I started out as a scout, and I hated it. I hated every minute of it because it wasn't very competitive. At least to me, it didn't feel competitive. And so there was a period there where I was like, I'm not. Once my contract's over, I'm done with football. I'm not doing this anymore. Um, but the competitiveness and really seeing others succeed in something that I couldn't succeed in, I take a lot of joy in that. Seeing other people, the hunger that our guys have to learn the sport and to be good at it. They're desperate. They're desperate for knowledge, right? And being able to give it to them and then see them have success with that's really satisfying to me.
And your wife, you're married, two kids. You met your wife in college?
I did. She was friends, one of my best friends growing up. I met him playing football. We were on the same team in fifth grade and been great friends ever since. Um, they went to the same high school together, and then we all were in college at the same time, and that's how we met.
I think one of your majors was, if I read that correctly, international politics. I don't want to get into that. I'm a sportscaster. I don't have anything to do with politics. But is that correct?
So no, my I have multiple degrees. I have a degree in I don't even know what my undergrad degree. I have to look it up. What did I get I do know I have a master's in information resources and library sciences. I'm actually very embarrassed now that I have no clue what my undergrad degree is. Uh, but obviously it hasn't played much of a role. But my master's degree, it's what you get if you want to be a librarian. And I was a grad assistant at the University of Arizona, and a grad assistant, you're the lowest level person on the college football totem pole. And this is back in the day. There wasn't very many college football staffs are huge now. Back then, there wasn't very many people, in support roles, and so we worked a ton. And they probably still work a ton now, but we worked a ton. And so it was the guys that I worked with. We were all in the same program, and it was all online, and that made it easy for us to get the classes done because we just couldn't attend a lot of the times. And so uh, I could be a librarian. I've got the credentials. If they had an interview though, and they asked me questions, it would probably get ugly fast because I there's a lot I don't know.
Well, what has to hand it to you? I mean, you're 41 years old, so the times when you've been in the classroom are a little bit back in time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
if we fast forward a little bit, I think 2007, you started working for the Atlanta Falcons. By the way, cool franchise. I always dig the Falcons. Unfortunately, sport-wise, success-wise, it's a little bit difficulty. It's a little bit difficult right now with the Falcons, but I heard like there are so many rumors right now about Bill Belichick who interviewed at the Falcons and all kinds of things, which I'm actually right now not interested. I want to know, how did you get in contact to the Falcons? I mean, how do I do that? Do I simply write a letter and apply, or do I simply go there and say, "Hey, I'm the best coach. You need me"? or how does that work?
Yeah, most of at least my understanding, the way it worked out for me, getting ahead in football is right place, right time, and work hard. Um, and some people never have the opportunity to be in the right place at the right time. And for me to get to the Atlanta Falcons, I was a grad assistant and I was working at the University of Arizona for a long time. And I was trying to get in the NFL, trying to get in the NFL, and no luck, no luck, no luck. And one day, I'm walking down the hall, and our defensive ends coach, a guy named Joe Robinson actually later went on. He was a coach at UTEP with Frank Roser. Frank Roser was a GA for him as well. Um, and Frank, the head coach of the Cologne Centurions, and coming back to the Frankfurt Galaxy, and an awesome human being. I love Frank to death. Um, so Joe Robinson, as we're walking past, he said, "Hey, you have any lucks, on your job search this year?" And I told him, "No, nothing. Try again next year." And he's like, "Well, I know a scout with the Falcons. Let me give him a call." And like 3 weeks later, I was driving to Atlanta to be an intern for him in training camp. And if we don't cross paths in the hallway that day, and we cross paths in the hallway every single day, but if that conversation doesn't come up, who knows? Who knows where I end up, what I end up doing?
Yeah, there are
It
always
was
certain
fortuitous,
situations in life where you simply have to meet the right person in the right time.
right? Is dumb
So
luck, dumb luck, and I showed up and worked hard, and it worked out.
a lot of people in Germany, football doesn't have that history, and a lot of people are new to the sport, and they know, okay, what the head coach does, what the offense coordinator does, defense coordinator. But when you stepped into the Falcons franchise, where you stayed, I think 7 years almost, you worked your way up. But what were the things that you had to take care of? I mean, you were assistant to the head coach. You did a lot with scouting new players, I think. What was it exactly? How was your daily work, from
Yeah.
morning to the evening?
Yeah, so I started out in the scouting department, and this was so videotape systems nowadays are much more advanced. It's a lot easier to make highlight tapes of guys and different things. We were preparing for the draft, and the first name that pops in my head, there was a quarterback from Oregon named Dennis Dixon. There was there was a lot of good players coming out in that draft. Glenn Dorsey, handful of other guys. But to make those tapes, we had little beta tapes, and they're yay big and yellow, and we had to go through and we time code. And as bad as it was like, okay, deep out route. Dennis Dixon throws a deep out. He throws a check down. He throws this. He throws that, and time code all those things. And as hard as that was for me and time consuming, that I would then take that down to the video guys. The guys would then take all the videos, like the 10, 11 games of Oregon that we had all tagged up, and they would take the plays and they would put them all together. And so that it was all grouped. So you could see all the passes outside the numbers, all the check, all those things. And every time I walk down there, those guys would look at me like, "You got to be kidding me," because I'd have this stack of tapes and papers like this. So I started out doing that, and went on the road a little bit doing some scouting. I went with a guy named Phil Emery, who had hired me. He went on to become the GM of the Chicago Bears later, an extremely, extremely intelligent person, an extremely hard worker. And we went out and we were grinding on the road, watching college players, going to a couple of college games. And, after that, I was kind of like, yeah, I don't know if this is really for me. Because it's like I said, it's not the competitive nature and it's not the strategic nature. Those are the things that draw me to the game, right? So that's what I started out doing. What it just so happens, our head coach at the time was a guy named Bobby Petrino. Bobby Petrino, in the middle of the night, with I don't know a few weeks left in the season, he bolted. This is also so he signs up to be the head coach. Michael Vick goes to jail later, my first day on the job, the PETA protesters were outside with signs, and because Mike had made some mistakes, and so it wasn't maybe the scenario that he'd envisioned as a coach there. I can never know what he's thinking. Um, but he bolts in the middle of the night so that he can get a job. While we're on the topic, these college coaches that go to the NFL, they quickly realize in the NFL, you can't cheat to win. Like it's very hard to win in the NFL. Like you have to draft well or else you're probably in deep trouble. And so most of
Yeah.
them find a way to get out of there as fast as they can because it'll tarnish their like I never lose legacy. Anyways, I don't know if that applies to Bobby Petrino or not, but he bolts in the middle of the night. They hire a guy named Mike Smith. And the guys I was working for at the time in scouting, I said, look, I don't know if this is really for me. Like, is it okay if I interview with Coach Smith if he has any positions open? And to their credit, they said, yeah, sure, go ahead. They weren't mad about it, anything like that. And so Mike Smith hired me on as his assistant, working with the offense. And that really helped me learn a lot about just how you manage a team, how you manage people, and from Coach Smith, dealing with his head coach duty stuff, and then working with the offense. That's where I began to learn literally everything I know about football today from those guys.
You just pointed out you learned how to deal with people. I mean, coaching American football, especially professionals, to put it in a nice way, it's not always the easiest characters that you have to deal with. Although being a former offense player, I will have to put out offense players are probably a little easier to handle than defensive players. But do you have any advices for German coaches? How do you deal with somebody who is desperate to be the big star in the team or always late for practice?
Uh-huh. Yeah, so in the NFL, the mechanic to handle all that stuff is you just fine them, right? Somebody does
Yeah.
something wrong, you fine them. And those fines are hefty fines. Those are big time fines. And most guys they'll either figure it out and they'll get it together, or if they're the sort of guy who's going to get fined all the time, they're probably not the sort of guy that you can rely on. You can't rely on them to show up on time. You probably can't rely on them to do what they're supposed to do on the field. They usually find their way out. And as a coach, you manage it for a little bit and then they're gone. Um, there are times where there's a superstar who maybe has some issues, interpersonal problems, or whatever you want to call it. But I think that that's actually fewer and farther between in the NFL level, at the NFL level, than people believe. And maybe I was just lucky to be on a lot of teams that didn't have a lot of guys like that. But schemes are complex in the NFL. What you're learning, how you're learning to do it, those sorts of things. Those guys, they're pretty much in tune because they're no different than the German counterparts or the European counterparts. They want to be coached and they want you to teach them, how you want to see it, and so everything can work together because everybody wants to win at the end of the day. When you come off that field, there's a losing is a bad losing never feels good, winning always feels good. And so
Exactly.
yeah, dealing with problem players in the NFL, it's not something that I had to do a whole lot. There's a few guys here and there. Um, and fortunately, I was never like the lead guy that had to deal with any issues. So I've seen it. I've seen it a little bit, but not as much as you'd think.
Okay, now fast forward a little bit. Okay, naturally, after 7 years with the Falcons, you had a stint with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which everybody can read about. But then in Europe called. Fast forward 2021, Europe calls the Potsdam Royals. First of all, how did you get in contact?
Yeah, as things were wrapping up in Tampa, like I said, I'd gotten the house out here before our last season in Tampa because I was pretty sure it wasn't going to work out. And then there was and I was burned out a little bit because football, as cool as it looks like on Sundays, like, hey, that's awesome. It's still a job from Monday to Saturday. I just had my second child. Very hard to give children and family the attention they deserve when you're working in the NFL. And so moving back to Phoenix, there was an Alliance of American Football that started up, and that was the precursor. So the XFL came back right before COVID, but then COVID killed the XFL, and then they brought it back yet again, and now there's merging and all sorts of crazy stuff going on with spring football in America. But the Alliance of American Football was desperate to get on the field before the XFL, and they just so happened to have a team in Phoenix. Their offensive line coach just so happened to be a guy I'd worked with 7 years in Atlanta, and their offices just so happen to be exactly 5 miles down the road. I can go out of my driveway right here to the main road and go 5 miles, and that was exactly where it was. And
Perfect warm up every morning.
yeah, it worked out perfect for me to transition to that because I thought I'd be done with football, and that just kind of fell into my lap and was lucky to get that opportunity. That didn't last though; they ran out of money quickly. We made it through 8 weeks of the season, and the tough part was that we had gone. I was already teetering on the edge of I hate football and I'll never do it again as things were wrapping up in Tampa. And we finished our last game in Tampa on January 1st. And then we started training camp on January 3rd in San Antonio for this Alliance of American Football. All the teams trained in San Antonio for a month. And there is there's nothing I like more than the off season. Um, Once the season, there's always a sense of relief. No matter for me, and maybe I'm not a fierce competitor like some other people, but once the season ends, I'm like, thank goodness that's over. I need to step away from this for a while. But from NFL to AAF, there was 2 days, and I had to pack my bags and go to San Antonio while my wife had to figure out how to get the whole house packed and move to Phoenix. Um, and so I went from one football season to the next. And if you're the sort of guy like me who loves the off season, like that's 2 seasons in a row. So when that exploded, I was like, this is perfect. I will never talk about football again for as long as I live. I'm done. So, and I know this is a long story here. So fast forward, we're actually doing some estate planning and like our will and just the morbid things you got to deal with when you got kids and like where's our money going to go if things if something horrible happens. And the lawyer, we're in there, and on his wall he's got pictures of his kids and they're all playing football, and so we start talking about football, and one thing leads to another, and I end up his son's a receiver in high school, so I end up doing some training with his son and a couple of the other players on that team. And I started an account on Twitter where I would post highlights from NFL games and stuff that would pop up, and I'd put coaching points on it so they could all look at it and see, the stuff that we were working on. They could see NFL guys doing it, and so it all translates. Well, the head coach of the Panthers in Poland, a guy named Jacob Semel, he followed me on Twitter, and I was like, this is crazy. Like this looks like real football. What is this? And so I messaged him. We Zoom call a few times. I taught him a few things about football, and he taught me a few things about football in Europe. And so he got me to sign up on a website called Euro Players, and then a couple of
Ah,
years
okay.
later, the
So at
Potsdam.
that time, you didn't really know a lot about football across the big water.
Well, and I say that, and I had been at the workout for Moritz Boringer when he was trying, when he got drafted. He worked out in West Palm Beach, Florida, and I was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the time. And so myself and our quarterbacks coach, we drove over to West Palm. Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback for that workout. He's been in the NFL a long time. And so I had seen the unicorns against the universe or whatever as I was watching tape on Boringer to prepare for the workout.
Yeah.
And so I'd gotten a glimpse of it before. It kind of, it was one guy and he came and he went and I'd kind of forgotten about it. And now, shoot, we've seen him out there. We've seen the same guy. We had to face him. I've seen the unicorns, the guys that were on that tape. So uh it's all come full circle, but he got me on Euro Players and then Potsdam contacted me. And it's a funny story about that. Uh we had set up, we were going to do an interview on, I don't know, Saturday at 1 p.m. or something. And then we had to change
Mhm.
the time. We had to move it up a little bit. And so it's Saturday at 10 or whatever. And I was upstairs. I was cleaning the bathroom window, mirror. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, I got this thing at 1. And then it dawns on me, like, no, I have this thing at 10. What time is it right now? And I look at my watch and it's like 10:15. And I'm like, uh-oh, I screwed this up. And so I
Great
run,
impression.
yeah, I go run into the computer and I'm frantically logging in. And they sent me a message like, we're really sorry we missed the first interview time, unprofessional on our end, but can we set it? Can we do it in like 15 minutes from now? I was like, yeah, no problem, not a big deal. And I was like, they screwed up. They didn't realize I'd screwed up. And so it was a funny story when I was out there telling them like this is what had actually happened that day that both of us had forgotten. But they brought me out. We did that. Kids were young at the time. Kids, this is 3 years ago, so 2 and 5, and it was really hard. It's really hard with little kids, especially when you're in a place that's a little bit hot and there's no air conditioning. I feel like as a parent, like you get angrier quicker. Uh, and so we actually decided we weren't going to continue to do it until the kids were older. And then the Barcelona Dragons, it was, almost time for the season to start back up. And the Dragons contacted us just out of the blue. And my wife had done a study abroad in Spain when she was younger. And it's when I'd talked to a handful of teams in the off season. And, every time I'd be like, hey, you want to go to this place? You want to go to that place? And she's like, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that.
Mm.
And so I texted her, hey, you want to go to Barcelona? And it was, yeah, let's go. So that brought us back. And it's worked out well. And when it stops working out well for her and my kids, then we'll stop doing it. But I don't think that'll be anytime soon because we're having a lot of fun doing it right now.
But what I'm interested in now, we have Andrew Weidinger and his wife and kids, and you're Americans and you're coming to Potsdam, which is like for an American, it must be like living in an open air museum because there are so many sites, there's so much history. Potsdam is so unbelievably full of history. Um, but you've been offense coordinator for the Potsdam Royals. So to let's put it that way, 3 weeks into the season, what did you think of the level of play in Germany at that time? Because that was in the German league in the GFL.
Yeah. So we've got this influx of all these American coaches coming over, right? Right now, it's more so than I'm guessing ever because you see, all these teams, these ELF teams are bringing in these American coaches. And I always say that's great, but they got to survive day one. And because I remember my first day, I was like, wait a second, this is not what I'm used to. Now I'm used to the NFL. It was drastically different. And it was a bit of a humbling experience because we had started with a full staff basically on offense, and like you say, by 3 weeks into it, I was the only one left. They'd all
Oh,
quit and been run off, and we're like, what are we? This is way too much stuff. Um, and so it was hard. It was hard to manage everybody at one time, but it was also really good for me to learn how to do that, and so it worked out pretty good in terms of my personal growth. Uh, so the level, obviously, I can't compare it because the NFL, there is no comparison, right? College football in the US is not comparable to the NFL. We just coached the Hula Bowl, which is a college all-star game, and a lot of those guys not good enough to play in the NFL, and that's the best football that I've seen live in a long time. So not comparable. There's a ways to go, and it's simply a popularity thing, right? Like all the best German athletes they're playing soccer growing up. They're not playing football.
yeah. To all the listeners, in about 5 minutes, we're going to do a little break and then we're going to resume our interview here. But before that, I want to know, I mean, it's like you've been to beautiful Potsdam, and then one has to hand it to you. You've chosen the next really nice place to live in Europe because Barcelona, one of my favorite cities. Um, but that was not Germany. That is the Catalan lifestyle. That is the Spanish lifestyle. Um, how did you and your family manage this change? Because it is a huge change.
Yes. You know, Spain, that was right up our alley. We could walk to the beach. We lived in it was two vacation rental towers, and the players lived in one, and coaches and staff lived in the other. And so my kids, I still to this day, I'll maintain, I don't think my son will ever have a better summer break his entire life because he thought he was best friends with all those players, right? And so we get back from practice and he'd say, "Hey, Dad, can you call up these guys and see if they want to go swimming with me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, and they're not going to say no to me." So I get home and Liam's jumping in the pool with all the players and they're having a great time, and it's always the people, right? Like location's kind of secondary to the people, and it was the players there were awesome. The staff there was awesome, and so we just had a great time, and then being close to the beach was just a plus, right? The beach and the pool, that's summer living right there. So we had a great.
But you had this switch from German Football League to the European League of Football.
Mhm.
Simply because there is this big quarrel in Germany, especially GFL contra ALF and stuff. Um, was it a level of play change for you, or was it simply a change of the way everything is organized?
Uh, I think that it is a level of play change because if you're a player and you have the option between playing an international schedule against teams from all over Europe or just playing a handful of teams in Germany, I don't think there's any debate, right? You're going to take the international slate, and we've seen that. We've seen all that talent go from the GFL, some whole teams, and then, or you take the Surge, for example, they take 15 guys straight off of their Unicorns roster as they move over. Their 15 best players. The best players, I think, are drawn to the ELF. I love the GFL. I had a great time in the GFL. I don't think it's quite the same anymore because of the draw of the international competition. There's a lot I
Uh-huh.
don't know about the history of the leagues and those sorts of things. And maybe one day it'll go back to just the GFL. Because let's not forget the ELF is still a startup and it's still struggling
Yep.
just like any other startup would. So You can't top the draw of that international competition though,
Mhm.
and I think that that's what's led the ELF to be the dominant league, on the continent now.
So far, my interview in Opu Meets with Andrew Weidinger, we do a short break and then we'll be talking Rhein Fire and we'll find out there are a lot of questions already. Robert Duckdown wants to know whether he's going to be a starter this season. We're going to talk about this after the break when we come back. We are back with part two of Opu Meets, second episode with the offense coordinator of Rhein Fire, Andrew Weidinger, is my guest tonight. Andrew, we just been chatting about Barcelona. There is this funny story that your wife learned how to drive the stick in Barcelona, and she was taught by Barcelona players. Did they were they late to practice, and you forced them to, or how did that happen?
We played week 2 in Hamburg and we beat Hamburg, which was huge for the organization. And so we went. Our rule was on the road. If we won, it was no curfew, and that may or may not have been a mistake on my part. But we had guys that would be walking back into the hotel to grab their stuff and jump on the bus, at 8 a.m. the next morning. But we had our two running backs, Tony Montone and Villa. Those guys, they managed to be late for the bus by about 60 seconds, and we had already pulled off, and those double decker buses. I was sitting on the top of one of them, and we were right down the road, and I heard somebody say like, those guys aren't on the bus, but they just walked out. They must have called them on the phone or something. And I said, we're turning around. We're not leaving somebody behind, which crazy enough to me became a sticking point between myself and ownership. They wanted to leave guys behind in Germany. I thought that was a dumb idea. But we went back, we got him. I jumped off the bus, walked up to him because they were about 100 yards away, and walked up and told him, hey, like these guys, they wanted to leave you behind right now. I wasn't going to let it happen. That's the good news. The bad news is I own you now. And so they said, to pay you back, we'll teach your wife how to drive. And because they had to, picking my kids would go to a little daycare deal while they were there so that my wife could do some work from home. And so they would help her go over there and pick them up, and they taught her how to drive. Because stick shift.
Which is not an easy thing. Who
No.
has ever driven a car in Barcelona? I mean, Paris is even harder, but Barcelona, this is not funny.
Yeah, and I'm fortunate. I learned on a stick shift. That's how I learned to drive. And when I got my first car, I got an automatic and told and said I will never drive a stick shift ever again. Guys, the propaganda behind like you can feel the car and feel the road. That's what it is. It's propaganda. It's lies. Get an automatic. You're crazy if you continue to drive stick shift. There's no reason whatsoever. Okay, whatever they're telling you, they're lying to you. They're making money somehow off of your belief that stick shift's better. Uh, and so she'd never done it, and she had to
I
learn.
think you won't have that big of a success in the car country Germany with
Right.
these opinions. I mean,
I'll never understand as long as I live why you would want to stick shift and not an automatic. But yes, Tony and Adrian, they taught her how to drive stick shift, and but we don't have to do it here. And I try to do all the driving when we're over there in
yeah.
Germany. It's terrifying driving in Europe. It's terrifying with all the people, bikes zooming past you as I'm trying to turn right, and pedestrians everywhere. Like I hate it. I hate having to
The
get in the car.
streets are not straight, they have curves, right?
Right. Like the grid, guys, put it on a grid. What were you thinking 3,000 years ago? You should have built your cities 100 years ago. Uh,
Yeah, that's a couple thousand years development that you see in the way those streets go. It's always funny if I go to Paris and you always see American tourists getting lost in Paris because they don't even know which way to hold the map, because they're so confused.
and
But let's get back to football. So you've been awarded head coach of the year with the amazing run you had with the Barcelona Dragons. And then for me personally, I was a little bit surprised. Then you probably could have been head coach in almost each and every ELF franchise, but you chose to be the offense coordinator for Jim Tom Sula. Why that?
there's a handful of reasons, and the biggest one is Coach Tom Sula. I spoke with him, and I believe in what he believes in. We come from similar backgrounds, obviously, in the NFL. There's it was very, very obvious very quickly that if I want to coach football and enjoy coaching football, that he's the guy that I need to follow, and regardless of where he is, and obviously a lot of other factors. Rhein Fire with that packed stadium. The biggest thing I knew that they could, with that many fans, they could probably afford to pay the bills. We had dealt with an entire season of ownership that couldn't meet their obligations. That was tough. That made things very hard. Trying to convince players like, hey, you need to do your job when nobody's paying you to do it. I could talk about that for ages. Uh, but
But as you said before, the ELF is still a startup, which
right.
everybody has to understand. It's like if we always look from the German perspective, we always look towards the NFL, but one should not forget um, in the beginning of the NFL, before the merger, there were numerous franchises that went bankrupt and a couple of owners that were not really, let's put it that way, the most blue collar office suit guys. There were some creepy features in the beginning of the NFL, one has to really say. Um,
They'll say the
so,
same thing about the ELF one day. I promise you that.
yeah, definitely. So now, if we're looking the preparation towards the 2024 season, first of all, do you know already? Do you have a date already when you will be hitting Germany?
We are anticipating opening training camp. I believe the middle of April, I think, is when we're allowed to do that. And like I said, with my kids, I'll come the last possible day that I can. So somewhere there towards the middle of April, whenever that is, that we can start practicing is when I'll get there. And we can do all of our prep. We have a Google Classroom. We do Zoom calls just like we're doing now. And so we do a lot of prep work before I ever get there, virtually.
Okay, now, which in the ALF I think is naturally in the beginning of this league in the first couple of years. There's a lot of changement in the rosters and everything. This year you have a great roster. Next year, some people might have changed to other teams or whatever. So take us through the process. How do you develop the offensive playbook? Because I mean, you can't come to, which we had a lot of times in Germany already, that American coaches came over, they had their playbook ready, but I'm sorry, you can't play a pass attack if you don't have wide receivers catching the ball. So how is that process? Do you have like a rough structure already, and then you see what do I have? And in the chat they're already asking why Willie P is not coming back.
All right, I'll handle the first question first. My first year in Potsdam, we weren't very good throwing the ball, and for whatever reason, my fault, players, whatever it was, and so we scrapped a lot of that part of the playbook. We've got the rough structure, right? Of this is where we're going to start out. We scrapped that, and we ran the ball 80-90% of the time. And our quarterback was an athletic guy, and so we used a lot of option runs and things where he could read defenders and try to take advantage of the defense. Um, my second year in Barcelona, we weren't very good at running the ball. So we scrapped almost all of that and we threw the ball 80 to 90% of the time. I firmly believe you want to play to your strengths. Uh, and so I thought our strength was throwing the football. Zach, throw it to Kyle, throw it to those other guys. And so we scrapped the run game and we expanded the pass game. And then this year, we were actually really good at both things. And by the end of the season, the volume that I could throw at the guys, and we're we're probably the only team. I haven't seen everybody, but we're running an NFL offense. This is an NFL offense. Uh, it's watered down to a slight extent, but it's pretty damn close to the real thing. We had more volume in the run game, more plays and formations in ways that we would run stuff in the run game than we had with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when I was there. Um, our
And
pass
you
game,
had last season, you had for European standards, you had an absolutely amazing O line,
yes, no question, no question. All
which
those
is
guys,
like everybody who is into football a little bit is the absolute basis that you need. If you don't have a good offense line, you can forget running, you can forget passing, then you can forget playing offensive ball.
No question, no question. It's all the fancy stuff, balls thrown down the field, all this and that. It's all cool to see. But if you can't block and you can't tackle, then it's pointless, right? If you're not good up front with your offensive line blocking, and if your defensive front isn't good at getting the other team on the ground, you're probably going to lose games. Like those are still the two most important things when it comes to football. And the offensive line that they had assembled here was outstanding. And those guys were extremely smart and could handle whatever I threw at them. And we threw because they could. We kept throwing more and more and more because I knew the guys we were playing, they couldn't practice what we were. The more stuff we throw in, the less they can practice of it, and our guys could handle it without blinking. And so that was a huge advantage, having those guys and having that level of intelligence on our team.
So 2024 season, European League of Football, Western Conference. Your opponents will be the Cologne Centurions, Frankfurt Galaxy, which you actually know pretty good already, Hamburg Sea Devils, Paris Musketeers, and the new franchise, the Madrid Bravos. This looks like a pretty tough conference, to be honest,
No question. Just like
because
last year.
if I'm just looking at it, Paris, Rhein Fire, Frankfurt Galaxy, if I only name these three, it's already very challenging. And the Madrid Bravos, we shortly talked before we started the show. I mean, they're signing everything that is not on the tree if you count to three. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I had the good fortune of at that the league did an event in Duisburg to start the season last year, and I was able to meet one of the owners of the Bravos there, and they kind of showed me what their plan was, and I was really impressed, really, really impressed with their plan, and they're obviously putting it into action now. So I expect, everybody kind of thought, two teams in Spain will shoot. They're signing everybody, like you said. There might be one. We'll see what the situation is with everybody there. But now all of a sudden we've got, Paris is doing everything they can to load up. Frankfurt's retooling. Who else we got? Cologne. Cologne is going to be an unknown. We got to play against a team that we haven't seen to start the season. Week 2, we got Frankfurt. Frankfurt doesn't have to play week 1, so they get to watch us, and we don't get to see them. I'm sure Coach Cosling will have something geared up for us this time around. Um, Speaking of
That
which,
would have been you just leading. It's perfect to chat with you because you're always leading into my next question. Um, it's like, how in the world can you prepare for a Madrid Bravo game?
you can't, and
You never this franchise didn't even exist half a year ago.
right, right, and so you really can't. And so we're fortunate. There was a rough draft of the schedule where we are going to play them week 1, and I was like, I don't know if I really like that. But we don't have them week 1, so we'll get to see them on tape, and we'll have a decent idea of what they do by then. But Cologne week 1, we have no clue what they're going to do, right? It's not a new franchise, but it's a new coaching staff, and they could be totally different than what they were doing previously. And so those are challenges, but I mean, it is what it is. Uh, You'd love to not have to deal with that sort of stuff, but that's the way football is, and we'll deal with it. We'll be fine, and we'll go out. We'll play our game.
And you'll be facing a couple of players that you've been coaching last season. I mean, some of the guys went to Paris, some went to Madrid. There is still, Jackie seems to be like a hardcore fan of Willie P. She still wants to know in the chats
I
when
dodged.
he left Rheinfire.
I dodged the question. I intentionally dodged the question. Um, I love Willie P. Willie P stepped in. We had kind of a plan to try to find somebody when Roby got hurt, and we started exploring our options. And obviously, it took us a week or two to get somebody. And Willie, a guy that he trains with, contacted me. I can't tell you how many times I get contacted by somebody, and I watch the tape, and I'm like, that was a waste of time. And this guy contacts me, and so I pulled up the tape, and I was like, oh shoot, this guy can play. And so we got in touch with Willie. Willie was the absolute best guy we could plug in. Willie understands football. Willie's a very good player. Willie did an outstanding
It was
job
plug
for us.
and play, right?
Yes, it was. He showed up. He showed up on Tuesday of the week we went to Paris. So he flies. He got off the plane and came to practice. Uh, we'd done a little bit to get him up to speed. He got himself up to speed come game day, 4 or 5 days later, whatever it was, and went and had 10 catches for 100 and something yards and a touchdown. I love him to death. And I think that as we go into this next season, we have a plan for what we're trying to do with our American spots. And if it works out the way that we hope it will, you'll all know and you'll all understand. Um, And if it doesn't, then you can circle back with me and I try to explain what we were trying to do. But
But right now, I mean, it's sure. I just saw Willie. He signed up with Madrid, so he is
yep,
with the Madrid Bravos now. Um, so you have the playbook. You have a little bit of video studies that you can do of your opponents. Where in general, the question is how much does the video of 2023 help you analyzing the 2024 Hamburg Sea Devils offense, for example?
right.
Because I think there's not a single player left from the 23 season, to over exaggerate that a little bit. Um, but now let's take us in your well, actually, the whole work is done as soon as the game starts, but what everybody sees is what you're doing during the games. I mean, how much influence, how much um, can you really do? I think your influence as a football coach is much bigger than, for example, in soccer. In soccer, you're standing out there, they're playing. Okay, after 90 minutes, you have them back and you lost. But in football, you're getting them back all the time. But they're in playing stress. You cannot load them with all kinds of informations. How do you find this level that they still can do what you tell them and you still get the changes that you want?
Yeah, I firmly believe this. I say this, I firmly believe this. The most overrated people in all of football are the coaches. Players go out and make plays. Players are the ones who catch the ball, to score the touchdowns, and do the tackling. Coaches don't do any of that, right? And so I think, all the credit for all of our success, it falls directly onto the players. Now, if things go south, it should also fall on the players. Okay. I've been there on teams where players aren't making plays or players are missing tackles or dropping balls. Like that's not a coaching issue. Okay. You can sort it however you want. And there's a lot of coaches who believe in extreme accountability and everything that goes wrong is my fault. And that's fun to say so that you sound like you're really into it. I don't think those things are totally true. Because I
It's
left.
probably also a little bit protecting your players, especially if you're in the US and the NFL or so, that you're protecting your players from the media a little bit, that you say, okay, put it on my back, I can take it in a way.
Right, right. All good coaches, regardless of what they believe, when asked in public, should say it's my fault. I've seen guys in private that say it's their fault, and it's like, just shut up. Like it's not your fault. Uh, but uh, but it really is. It falls onto the players and those guys. They dictate whether you're going to win or lose. And so as we're in games, there are some things where I'll say, hey, we need to adjust this, or they'll come off the field and say, hey, that wasn't clean. And so I say, okay, what did it look like? And we draw it up and we solve the problem. Then we got two players on our team, Florian Einhorn and Yazir Raji, who I tell them as we go into the games, like, because they do a lot of the blocking on the perimeter for us, that as they come off the field, the runs that we ran in that series, you tell me, like, did that look good? Did it feel good, or did it feel bad? And should we get back to some of this stuff? Because they're at the point of attack a lot, and so I lean on them, and then they lean on me. We got the first blitz in the championship game against Stuttgart. They go double A gap mug, two guys right over the center, and I see that safety creeping down, and that's an NFL style blitz. We used to call that Fonzie. You guys remember? I don't know if
Yeah,
it was you. Okay, so yeah, there's the Fonz, right? And he'd always say, "Hey,
Fonzie is known in Germany too.
okay, good. Well, yeah. So the thing is in football, you got your A gaps. Those are the gaps right next to the center. And you get two guys that blitz in there, and a third guy trails them through the A gap. And so if three guys in the A gap, we used to call a Fonzie because he'd say, hey. And as that number five was creeping down, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, here comes Fonzie. And so that is what they came with. And so uh, we went to the sideline and we discussed, this. I told them it's a game plan play. We're probably not going to see that blitz again because they're going to have a new one for us next time we get on third down. But this is what we got to do to handle that if it shows up again.
Ah, okay.
And those are the little adjustments that I can make to help. But ultimately, it's on them getting it done on the field.
And by the way, in the chat, Roat Dagdeon still wants to know whether he will be starting this season.
I've never heard of Rohat to whatever it is. I've never heard that name before
Backup
in my life.
quarterback.
So, doesn't sound not ringing a bell. So probably no. Tell Rohat whatever his name is. No.
Okay. So as a coach, Andrew, do you have any role models that you're following, like Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, or Jim Harbaugh, or somebody totally different?
Yeah, the biggest role models in coaching for me, like I said, my dad was one of my coaches when I was growing up. Uh, anytime you got your dad as your coach, like they ride you a lot harder than the rest of the players. But I obviously learned a lot from him. When then I went to high school, and like I mentioned before, two coaches that I hold in very high esteem from there, and they taught me a lot about how to really motivate people, and when's the right time and the wrong time to to raise your voice and to do to change your attitude. Uh, and maybe I don't follow that like I should sometimes, but I certainly learned a lot from those guys. And then um, a big role model from afar for me, and I shouldn't say role model, just somebody that I've admired is Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll was the head coach of the Seahawks up until a couple days ago. And he was the head coach at the University of Southern California when I was at the University of Arizona. We were both in the Pac-10 at the time. And that's a guy who's going out there and he looked like he was having fun. And there is a lot of and I touched on it earlier, like football, don't let anybody confuse you. Like football's not fun most of the time as you go up the levels. In the NFL, it's not that much fun. The games are fun. The guys that tell you they're having fun all the time, they're full of it. They're lying. Like it's not that much fun most of the time. And and the joy gets sucked out of a sport that should be fun, right? It's a game. And at the end of the day, it's just a game. And I always saw Pete Carroll having fun on the other sideline, smiling, throwing the ball, running around. That was always cool to see because I'm sitting on my sideline like, man, sick and tired of all these people, like this isn't any fun.
Yeah, and one
Uh,
has to hand it to Pete Carroll in his age, like taking off his shirt and saying hi to his new wide receiver a couple of years ago.
yeah.
That was pretty impressive at his age. I mean, one has to hand it to him.
Yeah.
But now we're talking already about the NFL because that is something that I wanted to do getting to the end where we have the Super Wild Card weekend behind us. Now we're heading to the divisionals. Um, I just want to go through the games. What do you think? Who is the expert? Because now I have an expert here. I want to know who's the favorite. Uh, we start out on Saturday with Texans at Ravens.
So unfortunately, the amount of NFL football that I've watched since I left the NFL is extremely low. But I'm going with the Ravens. The Ravens offensive coordinator is a guy named Todd Monken, who I worked very closely with in Tampa. They have an assistant on their staff who I worked with in Tampa, and one of their trainers was my roommate in Atlanta. Uh, so I gotta root for the Ravens. Those guys all good guys, and I hope that they have success.
So on Sunday, the number seven seed that rocked the wild card round, the Green Bay Packers, and they're hitting against one of the top favorites to win the Super Bowl, the 49ers. Who do you take?
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually model the Rhein Fires model a lot after the San Francisco 49ers and how they play on offense. So I'm a big fan of what they do schematically. Uh, the Packers head coach is a great guy. Him and his brother is an offense coordinator somewhere in the league, but they came into Atlanta the year after I left, and his brother ended up he had the same desk that I used to have. And so I met them at the combine the next year. And so we had that in common. So we kind of hung out and talked a little bit. And I really like those guys. So the 49ers, they've had their run. Let's go with the Packers. Let's see what they got. Jordan Love deserves it.
Ooh,
Jordan Love's taken a lot of
good.
heat for not being Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers comes out and says some dumb stuff. So let's see if Jordan Love can make those people up there forget about Aaron Rodgers.
Well, I think the next matchup is pretty easy to forecast what your favorite will be. The Buccaneers against the Detroit Lions. Buccaneers, where you used to be in the coaching staff, Detroit Lions, we Germans have to be for Detroit because Amon Ross and Brown, I mean, he's German.
Yeah, he's done awesome too. The little I've
Yeah.
seen, he's looked really, really good. But there's a lot of really good people who work in that Tampa organization. There's not as many as when I was there. The same faces. But when I was out at the Hula Bowl, I saw a handful of guys that I worked with the Bucks who are still with the Bucks, and I hope that those guys are able to pull out the victory because those are good people, and I like to see good people have success.
Okay, then we have one more, and I think this is going to be, it has everything to be the next Ice Bowl. Chiefs against Bills.
All right, funny Ice Bowl story. So when I first started with the Atlanta Falcons, I got my phone. that they gave me. They had like a work phone they gave me, and my phone number used to belong to a guy named Boyd Dowler, who was a superstar wide receiver for the Packers back in the day. The reason I got hired in Atlanta is Boyd retired as a scout there. And so I've got Boyd Dowler, hero of the Ice Bowl, of the original Packers, like a legend in Green Bay, probably doesn't pay for a drink anytime he walks into a bar in the entire state of Wisconsin. Well, I would get calls constantly during football season. Hey, Boyd, you want to jump on WKRW here in Green Bay and talk about the ice? This temperature today is going to be -7. You want to talk about that? And I wanted so badly to say yes. Yes, I do want to jump on the radio with you. But I had to explain it's not Boyd Daller's phone. Like, I don't know what his new number is. I'm very, very sorry. Uh, so now who's playing who? I heard Ice Bowl and
Chiefs, Bills.
Chiefs Bills. I mean, that's the Super Bowl, right? You see that
Yeah,
run Josh Allen had this last week? Oh my goodness. And Pat Mahomes, that guy's a freak. That's a great showdown. You'd love for that to be the last game of the season. They had was it a playoff game? Was it last year, the year before, where it was back and forth and the Chiefs came back at the I mean, oh my goodness. It's a shame they got to play in bad weather because those are two teams that can absolutely light it up with two great young quarterbacks. That's gonna be a good football game. I couldn't begin to tell you.
yeah, that's
You know,
going to be great. So before I let you go, I have David in the chat, and he says, "Does Andrew Weidinger have any tips for youth coaches?"
unfortunately, I don't have a lot of experience with youth football. If anybody, I don't have general tips. Like, have fun, go out. That's my best advice is have fun. Make sure the kids are having fun. Make sure you're having fun. That's the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing now because it's fun. When football stops being fun, then stop doing it. Or as a kid or as an adult coaching it. And when it stops being fun, stop doing it. Don't do things that aren't fun. Too much in life, we get stuck in situations that we don't enjoy for money, for whatever, and unless you have to do it to support a family or something like that, stop. Find something else. So go out there, have fun, and make sure that the kids are having fun. Quit yelling at little kids. Like let them discover themselves out there, and then encourage them. If you're gonna yell, make sure it's positive and encouraging. That's my best advice.
Andrew Weidinger, thank you very much for your time. I think all of not only Rhein Fire fans, but all of football Europe is looking forward to you stepping better on our uh, on our terrain and be coaching again. We're really looking forward to it. I hope you will be having a great season in 2024. We definitely see each other when I'll be commentating Rhein Fire games, and maybe this year 2024 we'll be having a drink again like in last season's championship party, which was really funny. It was really amusing to see that Jim Tomsula is such a party beast. I never would have thought it.
We're having fun,
um
baby. We're having
yeah,
fun.
so thank you very much, and this was the second episode of Opu Meets with Andrew Weidinger. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
listening. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.